Welcome to the Financial Style, The Apprentice review and reaction. My name is Marisha Stevenson, and after all of these years of watching The Apprentice, I wanted to do something a little bit different and look at how we can use this show to learn some real business lessons. Now, if this is your first time to the Financial Style, this is a great time for you to consider commenting, liking, sharing, and of course subscribing, because I'm pretty sure that this is one of the only places where you're going to find something like this. So without further ado, let's get into it. So The Apprentice this year has started with the lyrics from Lord Sugar. You will not be furloughed, you will be fired. I quite enjoyed that. I don't know about you. But before we get into the first episode, let me just give you a rundown of the contestants and let you know which ones kind of resonated with me and which ones didn't. Now, we've got Akeem, who's 30. He said he ain't talking rubbish. We're going to see how that goes. Francesca, who's 27. Now, the fact that she started talking about that she was a descendant from William Wordsworth made me think you're going to be one of those pedantic people, aren't you? You know, the people who nitpick on everything. I think that's what she's going to do. Brittany, who's 25, is an amateur rapper. Nicholas, who's 35, wants to sell water online. Like we ain't got taps in our houses. Sharma, who's 42, she was juggling tape as her sort of, talent, which I thought was really interesting. I can't juggle, so I'm like, fair play to you, girlfriend. Naveed, who's 27, to be honest, I feel like he watches Wendy Williams. He was all on, how you doing? How you doing? You know how Wendy does it. How you doing? He was all on that. So I'm just like, okay, Naveed. Stephanie, who's 28. I got to be honest with you. She looks like a troublemaker to me. I feel like within the women, there's always a bit of a bitchy one. And I just feel like it's Stephanie. I don't know why. I'm making judgments. Harpreet, who's 30. Now, she thinks she's funny. And usually if people think they're funny, they're not as funny as they think they are, but it'll be interesting to see how that goes. Sophie is 32. Now she's what young Philly would call a rock gal. Now I can't even knock it because I'm a bit of a rock gal myself, to be fair. I'm not wearing one right now, but I very often do. And she was talking about, she's done level 3 of which school? So I don't know if she's trying to put spells on Lord Sugar to get the deal. Boom, yeah, not funny. Amy, who's 48, seems like the oldest of the pack actually. Basically said she don't take no for an answer. She's not interested in no. She's not accepting no. No is not happening. So I'm going to wait for somebody to tell her no. Amy sounds American to me as well, which I think is quite interesting. So I'm intrigued to see what she's bringing from across the pond. Aaron said he's not a clown, but he's got a size 10 foot. He seems to be full of life and very outgoing. Akshay, who's 28, now he said he all about the money, okay? And then he said he was born saying something stupid. I don't know what it was, but yeah, he all about the coin, so we'll see. Catherine, who's 29, she just said you got to work harder. The harder you work, the luckier you are. So that says something about her ethos, maybe. Alex, who's 28, said he's not great at maths. I hope he can add up money. I'm not great at maths. Can't do trigonometry to save my life. But I tell you what, you can't rob me because I can add up the money. Harry, who's 35, doesn't seem to have very much personality. So I'm intrigued by that one. And Connor, who's 29, reckons he knows the score. And of course, many of them came out with their crazy sayings and their interesting points of view, and we'll sort of go from there. Now I have got notes in case you're wondering what I'm looking at every so often, because there was a lot and I needed to take notes. The beginning of the episode I actually really enjoyed, and mainly because I don't know about you guys, but I am a big fan of Claude. Yeah, you know, Lord Sugar's got his sidekicks. He's got Karen. He's got Claude. And I like them, you know. Karen's learned how to do all the faces, you know, the kind of what they're doing, what they're talking about faces. And Claude, you know, has got the lyrics and the lines, and he just comes out with things where he just lets people know that they're stupid in like 2 words. So I'm a big fan of Claude. So of course we all knew that Claude wasn't going to be in this series because unfortunately Claude had actually quite a really bad bike accident. Get well soon, Claude. You know, we're out here, we're praying for your child. We're speaking to the ancestors for you. So, you know, he's had to undergo a lot of treatments and a lot of surgeries and all the rest of it. So he's not in this in this series. So, because of course now Black Lives Matter, I was so happy to see that they brought back the very first apprentice, Mr. Tim Campbell, MBE. I was really pleased to see that. So we started off with an empty chair. It was all very, you know, mysterious. And then Lord Sugar welcomes in Tim and says, you know, they've got a lot of respect for each other. He was the first one. This series, of course, is going to be tougher than ever, and he's going to be making the decision about who's going to get his £250,000 investment. Now, I've got to be honest with you. Yeah, I don't know about you, but I feel like The Apprentice got stupid a while ago, okay? And it seems to have been when there was a transition between them getting a job with Lord Sugar or having investment funds from him. It made me think that he's thinking, when I'm giving you a job, I'm looking for a certain personality. So I've got to be honest, when I used to watch it back in the day and people used to get jobs from him, the £100,000 salaried job, which of course Tim won originally, I feel like he would select people who he thought were good team players, that he could mould, that had a level of flexibility, that almost weren't the finished article. And it's interesting because I've interviewed over the years a number of people who have been on The Apprentice on Financial Style, which is a radio show outside of here. And you know, many of the apprentices that I've spoken to have all sort of said a similar thing when he was giving them a job. Now that he's investing in their businesses, now it's a whole different thing. And I do wonder whether their business plans and the ideas that they have do play into whether they become investment vehicles later on. Because I gotta be for real, these days for me The Apprentice is a mixture of the odd few people who are really serious about business and genuinely want that investment, and then a whole load of people who think they've got great personalities who are basically trying to be the next TV personality. So I'm not always convinced that they're all serious. Do you know what I mean? And business acumen seems to have gone out the window for people who want to talk about being born with money in their mouths and all of the little quips and sayings that it is that they seem to say. But you know, let me just I'm getting ahead of myself now. Let me just hold it down before we go any further. So we start off as we usually start off, and that is where the boys and the girls split into teams, and they usually start off where it's all girls and all boys. They don't get into any sort of team building initially, and then they get set their very first task. And their first task was an advertising task. They need to market a cruise line, okay, and they had to develop the brand and then put a TV advert together and a social media tease, and then we're going to present this. They have to present this to brand experts, okay? And so they then go on to an actual ship to be told this, and they get a chance to look around the ship, and obviously it's a little bit of a prop, but I think the idea behind it is that, you know, it just gives them a feel for what it's all gonna be about. So of course, in terms of the observations, we have a swap around. Karen observes the boys team and Tim observes the girls, okay? And so of course the very first job they have to do is to pick a team captain. Now the thing with the team captain thing is that it's a very precarious situation, and I love watching this process, because what you get is you get the bold people who are like, listen, I know that if I'm team captain first and I win the task, it's very likely that I could, you know, go a good distance in here. Plus, do you know what I mean? I don't want to be the one who looks like I'm not trying to volunteer for it, because that within itself can create issues. So on the girls' team, when they hear what the actual task is, Catherine stands up immediately and says, listen, do you know what I mean? I used to sell cruises. I've got this one in the bag. Like, I'm going to be project manager, you know, and it's all done and it's all dusted. When it's time for the men to have the same conversation, oh child, we heard tumbleweed for a while. And then eventually Akshay kind of said, well, you know, I'm open to doing it. And all the guys went, yeah, you can do it. So then they start talking about themes, right? So we're selling a cruise liner. Now, I don't know if you've ever been on a cruise. I have, okay? And I've got to be honest with you, some of the stereotypes about cruises is true. Old people, really old people. But then some of the stereotypes about cruises are absolutely not true. So Catherine's idea to make it a cruise that you sell to friends and to young people, I actually thought was a really good idea. Because on a personal level, I absolutely would go on a cruise again. I ain't that old. I'm not that old. And I also would select the type of cruise I would go on, because there are definitely cruises for younger people. But the thing is, it's a great way for you to see loads of countries at the same time, particularly if you're not sure whether you want to visit somewhere. I mean, I went on a Caribbean cruise. If I had not been on that Caribbean cruise, I would not know that Aruba for me is one of the most beautiful islands in the world. Like, I could live in Aruba, and I decided that in a whole day of being there. And I'm sorry to say this, but Dominica, which is a country I thought I would absolutely love, yeah, not so much. Did not like Dominica at all. So I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't gone on the cruise. So I say that to say cruises are really good things. And then on top of that, there's lots of entertainment that you can have on cruise ships. There's lots of things you can do on cruise ships. Plus you can also do nothing and just eat. So it really is a good environment for friends. When Catherine said, let's market this to friends, I thought that's a really good idea. Francesca started questioning it. Francesca's like, I think this should be for over 45s, you know, and this is the first time we see Catherine's personality shine through. Because Catherine just went, yeah, okay, that's nice. And because it gave me the most joke. Because Francesca said, let's take a vote. The first time we see Catherine's personality shine through, Catherine said, yeah, no vote. I vote there's no vote. We're going with a young person's theme. I said, okay, I can see what kind of autocratic rule we've got going on over here. So that was funny. We go over to the men, and oh my days, these boys do not have a living clue. One of them, they start talking about cruising. Let's market it to older people, where there's a focus on well-being and, chilling out. And I'm like, you really haven't been on a cruise. Because don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that older people now are not interested in well-being, but the older people are on the cruise to party, okay? Like, don't get it twisted. Don't think because, Betty's 75 that she's not out here shaking her leg. Like, let's not misunderstand what's going on these cruises. So I was a bit like, and when they even asked the question, have any of you been on cruises? They were like, no. I was like, and we can tell. They decide to split the teams up, okay? So obviously they split themselves in two. The girls say, okay, there's going to be a sub-team. Amy volunteered to be the sub-team leader because that task was going to involve creating the advert for, I think the advert and the social media tease was that side of it, and the other team were going to do the branding. So I think they said, okay, we're going to do that. So Amy, Harpreet, Sharma and Brittany became the ad team, and the rest of the ladies stuck around to do the branding. And on the boys' side of things, the branding team became Nick, Harry, Nav and Akeem to do the branding, and the rest of the guys were gonna do the advert and the social media tease. Okay, so we've got two separate situations here, and it was made clear on the boys team that the key themes, the three themes, were health, luxury and the ultimate experience. Now I don't know what kind of theme the ultimate experience is, but okay, now if this is what we're doing, now this is what we're doing. Okay, the girls said, right, we're gonna go for bougie. Like, we want a theme, our branding's gonna be based around bougie. Now this was really interesting to me, okay, because when Catherine made that suggestion, once again a Catherine autocratic rule suggestion, when Catherine made that suggestion, I was kind of like, no, I'm cool with that, like I get that, do you know what I mean? But then there started to be questions about, well, do we know what bougie means? Now I'm thinking to myself, I feel like I know what bougie means. I mean, I'm the person right here who is sipping water out of a champagne flute. Like, to me, this is bougie, you know? But Sharma was like, well, no, I can't remember what it was. I think it was Sophie or someone who was like, I don't think older people are going to know what bougie means. And I was well offended because she was like, I don't think people over 40 will know what bougie means. And I'm like, excuse me, girlfriend, I'm 41, behave yourself. I have a good understanding of bougie, okay? Okay. But then Sharma came out with, well, I don't know what bougie is. I was like, oh, okay. Okay, maybe she had a point. So they were talking about that. So I liked the idea of the theme, because I'm thinking, like I say, what I understand about cruises, you know, like on a cruise ship, you get dressed up every day to go to dinner. I mean, you can also not do any of these things, but for example, like you can get dressed up every day to go to dinner. You get changed to club at night time. Then during the day, you're out on the beach in the various countries that you visit, or go into the towns, depending on what you want to do. Like, I really feel like it can be bougie. That it is bougie, do you know what I mean? You know, so bougie that when I went on a cruise with the people I went on, I watched a whole table of people order escargot. And I was like, do y'all know what that is? And I heard, it was my auntie, and she was like, no, but it sounds nice, I'm gonna try it. And I just sat there like, oh, these people are bougie, because in a minute they're going to find out that they ordered snails, and I'm going to see how this goes. So, because half the table copied her order, when it came, my aunt looks at it, and she's like, can I just ask, what are these? And the waiter's gone, oh, it's snails. Oh my, she was like, oh no, because we black people, we ain't eating snails. She was like, oh no, can I change it for something else? And then half the rest of the table that ordered it also changed. That's bougie, okay? That's bougie. Now this is where the business lessons really start to come into play, okay? Because the brandings, let's start with the branding on the men's team, okay? Because, oh my goodness, I have never seen anything like it. So they're still out here on this whole vibe about health and well-being, okay? They forgot the part that was luxury and the ultimate experience, which I don't know what that means anyway, but anyway. Excuse me. Yeah, they forgot that part. I'm going to show you on the screen the logo that they came up with, okay? Yeah, rule number 1 when establishing a brand in a business: come up with a decent logo, please. 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 And you know what? Because I'm going to say this. The ladies, and I'm going to show you their logo as well, theirs was also equally a bit rubbish. Better than the boys. But it was also rubbish, okay? And why? Because the very first thing is, if you're going to classify certain terminology and certain experiences with your brand, then you want a brand that actually looks like what you were talking about, okay? So, going back to the boys, which part of that shows health and well-being, okay? Them assuming that a wave mimics someone doing yoga, and making it brown and green because it's earthly. No. I mean, the simplest type of logo you could put together would be something with a nautical theme. Think about it. It could be a I was going to say a steering wheel. They're not called steering wheels on ships. Oh no, what it's called, if I'm honest with you. But the steering wheel, okay, on the ship. Even something like that. That's nautical. Do you know what I mean? An anchor. That's nautical. A picture of a ship. I mean, that's nautical, okay? And then if you're thinking about cruises, yeah, because what's the first thing that comes to mind when you think about a cruise? I can't speak for other people, apart from the fact that I've been on one. So having been on one, you know, I do think about the deck and the partying and, you know, it's a whole life, basically. You're living a whole miniature life on this ship. But everything to extremes, you know, it's like extreme relaxation, extreme partying and all the rest of it. But you're in the middle of the sea, okay? So if you're going to think of even waves and the ocean, I mean, those are the sorts of things that come to mind, okay? And then for the girls, with their bougie name, I don't even know what are the guys called theirs? I don't even know. Spirit of the Sea. They said they wanted a mindful ship. Never-ending nautical. That's the foolishness. So the guys called it never-ending nautical, with nothing that looked particularly nautical. And on top of that, never-ending nautical. Like, that just to me says never-ending in the sea. Now I don't want to be in the sea forever, and that's not the purpose of cruises. You're in the sea to take you places, but you're not like cast out to sea. You're going somewhere. So that doesn't make any sense to me. And then the girls now called theirs bougie, okay? I was cool with that. Like, I had an image in my mind. Why is their logo the word bougie? I mean, girls. And this is where you can use your logo as a way to communicate your brand. So for example, in their case, they could have had bougie, but they could have had a cocktail glass, for example. Do you know what I mean? With, I don't know, what looks like a splash of either wine or the sea or what have you. They could have brought in that idea of water waves, but within the glass, for example. I've got a frog in my throat. Oh. You know, but they could have definitely done more with their brand imagery to give us an idea as to what they were actually talking about. So in that sense, it was pretty woeful. Okay, so let's just talk about Akshay for a minute, who's leading the guys, okay? If Catherine is authoritarian, Akshay, I don't know what Akshay is. So maybe a bit delusional. So when Akshay was setting the task in the first place, what was hilarious was Akshay comes out with, guys, let's do something different. Let's do something different. Different market. Let's target the over 45s. Empty nesters. You're like, Akshay, that is the epitome of stereotypical cruise goers. So I don't know why that's something different. And then another thing that was interesting, when he was selecting his team and he made Akeem the team leader, Akeem said, I don't really know anything about branding. And Akshay said, but I thought you said you did branding in your business. And Akeem said, well, yeah, like, you know, I've touched it, but I mean, it's not my area of expertise. Akshay was like, do you want to do it? Akeem's like, well, yeah, I'll do it. And I'm like, okay, so you've both set yourselves up then for a fall. Proof in the pudding, NAF logo. Okay. So Akshay ain't really got very much sense at the moment, but Akshay's also not a very good listener, which is the bit that's more worrying. So by the time we see the finished product of the logos, I'm already predicting at this point that the guys are going to lose, okay? Because I don't know who they think is never-ending nautical that looks like some green and brown turd, I think was the polite term used to describe it. And like I say, even the girls are a little bit off the mark, but not quite as badly off the mark. And they at least made the logo blue, which is representative of the sea. So we can kind of understand where they're going with this. And then we turn over to the adverts. So we go to the boys and they're making their advert, okay? And we start to see how Akshay continues to not lead so much as dictate. So Aaron and Alex are getting really frustrated. Aaron's expected to be the captain and the butler and everything rolled into one in his acting role, and he's just like, I'm not here for it. I'm really tempted. The part of me thinks Aaron just wants to go, is it because I is black? But that's a different conversation. Alex is getting annoyed because he's expressing ideas and thoughts to Akshay, and Akshay is pretending to listen whilst not really listening. And to be fair to these guys, they are communicating quite well, actually, quite openly and quite clearly. And they do ask him, hey, are you really taking on board what we're saying? And Akshay's like, yeah, and then just isn't. So there comes a point during the day where they convene and they compare notes with each other. So on the sub-team for the boys, for the men, of course, we've got Akeem, who is the sub-team leader. You've got Naveed, who has spent all day telling Akeem that his ideas are stupid and they ain't gonna work and it ain't working for him and he's not feeling this entire thing. And then you've got Nick, who's congratulated the whole team by saying, hey guys, I think we've nailed the 3 pillars. Remembering that one of those pillars is luxury and the other one of those is ultimate experience. All of this that's meant to be on the never-ending nautical cruise that is on the Sequility ship. So we can see where this is all going, okay? And I've got to be for real, Akeem to me, alongside Akshay, is gonna be in that boardroom fighting for his life. Because the fact that he can even agree that this is a logo and a decent logo. P.S. No name attached to this logo. Just the logo says it all. Oh, and my apologies. Not Naveed, it was Harry. Harry was the one who was being disruptive to Akeem, and Harry was the one who was basically ensuring that they knew that the logo was foolishness, but they tried their best and, he wasn't responsible for that. Yeah, the exact words that Harry used was, don't be alarmed. At which point, what do? All become very alarmed. Then we cut to the girls. So what we see on the girls team is that we've got Catherine in ultimate rule. Francesca doing everything that she can to nitpick at everything. And I've got to be for real, this is what I don't rate about this show and about some of the characters, because there comes a point where you just go, okay, we need to work as a team and we need to make the best of the situation. And I do feel like Francesca is a bit nitpicky. And if the girls, by any stretch of a miracle, were to lose this task, I could see Catherine bringing Francesca into the boardroom with her just because she's been getting on her nerves the whole of the day. Amy's fully lost out on the sub team to the other girls, and please, okay, so word to the wise, okay, I'm a woman who loves to wear colours, but if you ever find out that you might be doing filming, in fact, I would even argue that if you are so bold as to be on a TV programme where there's cameras following you around all day, do not wear green. And I think it's Stephanie that wore the green. Don't wear green, Stephanie. Don't wear green, baby, because green is also the colour of the green room and the green screen, which means it's used as a base to lay images over the top. So when these ladies do their bit of filming, which I have to say for their social media, which was rubbish, I've got to be honest with you, just literally them wearing their business suits looking like they're put on, like they just dashed something over their shoulders or something glittery and started jumping up and down, whatever. When they started doing that, stood to reason that the woman in the green was going to get left out of the whole scene because she was over, they basically went over her, so they had to cut her out of everything. But to me, that's like, you should have just known better, innit? You're on TV. Like, green is a beautiful colour. I love green. Green suits melanated skin. Girlfriend, don't wear green. Just saying. Don't wear green. So let's just take a note on leadership and leading a team, okay? I think it's fair to say that at this point we've got Catherine and Akshay actually both doing very similar things in that they are almost leading the team with an iron fist. Their ideas are the right ideas and everybody else's needs to go to the highway. They are not really being very inclusive in their approach to leading. And I think it's the viewpoint that as project manager, their job is to lead from the front. But I would actually argue that the best form of leadership leads from behind. And what that's about is about letting people know that they are supported, but facilitating them to do the jobs that they need to do. And in certain instances, asking the right questions and allowing space for things to happen. Now, what's really interesting is that Akeem, I think, on the sub-team personified this idea or this issue very, very well. Akeem was also quite poor in his leadership of the sub-team, mainly because Akeem's biggest concern was time. And so because he was so focused on we don't have time, we've got to do all of these things in a very limited amount of time, Akeem was very much like, I ain't got no time to discuss this. Is everybody okay with this? Okay, we're moving on to the next thing, and we're moving on to the next, and we're moving on to the next. And it's really easy in business to do that, to put yourself in a situation where you're so focused on one aspect, you lose the idea of quality. Yes, it's a high pressure environment. Yes, it's a difficult environment. But I think this is where, as leaders, learning how to ask the right questions and to hone in on the right things quickly can be the thing that makes the difference. Why? Because if you have a group of people that are expressing concern or asking questions about your logo, for example, or your brand name, Catherine, then what that says is that means the wider buying public is likely to also ask those questions. So let's think about how we address those issues as we're going along. As I say, for that reason, it could have been that from Catherine's point of view, she worked out ways to put the imagery of bougie or something that could be considered bougie into her logo and into the brand, and thought about how that might even look in terms of an advert or even in the pitch, which we'll get onto later on. And then you have the other team who, again, it's making sure that they really are on the same page. And I think the difficulty that they had is they don't even know what the hell a cruise is and what it looks like. So because nobody really had that knowledge, what was very clear was they all bought their different ideas of what they thought it was, mashed it all up into a bowl, and came out with a turd on a piece of paper with no name of the company or the cruise underneath it. So what you've got here is a lack of clear direction, but added to that a lack of basic knowledge of how you put together a brand, which means that Akeem should not have been the sub-team leader. So we can see what's going on here. Wrong people in the wrong places with the wrong knowledge doing the wrong things. It's not really a surprise. Anyway, we then get on to the pitches. And once again, we have Autocratic Rule by Catherine and by Akshay, who both decide what the pitch teams need to look like. Catherine chooses herself, Sophie and Amy initially to go into the pitch, and then of course Francesca says, hey, listen, I've got experience in pitching, I want to go in there as well. And I think Brittany throws her 2 cents in as well, and I think ultimately she picks Brittany, I think at this point, because she can't take Francesca. So Akshay, now I don't know what Akshay saw that the rest of us did not see, but Akshay has decided that to join him now for his pitch, he's gone for Akeem. Now, I do wonder whether this is because the logo is that bad that Akshay's thinking Akeem's going to have to come and answer for his work because I'm not responsible for this. In which case, it also speaks to the fact that his leadership's not really fantastic and also tells you something about how Akshay's mind works. But there it goes. Connor. Now, can I just say that if you've watched this whole thing right to this point, you ain't heard me mention Connor outside of telling you who Connor was in the first place. I ain't heard a living word come out of Connor's mouth, so I don't know what it is that Connor's going to be able to say in a pitch because he can't say nothing in the team. And then I'm pretty sure he said Nick. And I kind of hope he didn't say Nick, because Nick is the person who thinks that their logo is great and that they've worked really well together. Whereas it just doesn't make any sense to me. When you look at the characters in that room, Aaron is very chatty. Alex has a lot to say. You know, it just makes you think there'd be better candidates to be going into the actual pitch. So then we go into the pitches. So let's take the girls first. They were up first. And firstly, what I will say is I didn't think that any of the girls were particularly good speakers. And that's not particularly good when you're doing a pitch. And then, of course, the real unravelling comes when it's time for Catherine to explain bougie. At which point, backstage, Shama starts going, yeah, I told you I didn't know what bougie was. I told you I didn't know what it was. Nobody could explain to me what it was. She can't explain to them what it is. And, you know, throws her 2 cents in there. But this is the thing, Catherine, if you're going to be so clear about a name and an image and an idea, girlfriend, at least be able to explain it, please. I beg. When it comes to answering the questions, the girls are not very good. So once again, to me, overall, they really didn't have a great pitch. But I still feel like what they're going to put forward and what they did put forward is better than what the boys have got to offer. The hilarious part to me is when they come out of the pitch after they've been asked some pretty sensible questions and not really been able to answer them massively well. And they come out of the pitch and Shama says the ultimate setup question, so how did you think that went? And Catherine goes, oh, I think it went really well. And she's like, really? Did you? Code for, we did not. We did not. We did not. Now the boys step onto the stage to do their pitch looking like 4 misfits out of the Fabulous 4. I don't know what kind of superhero stance they came on that stage with, but I'll be honest with you, that was the most power shown throughout the entire thing. So the boys do their pitch and as thought, it's rubbish. The advert has just got really poor lighting. They do the social media tease, and whilst they manage to sort of theme it into what is the crappy logo, the fact that Connor has said nothing for the entire episode but then announces that he is the assistant director of a blockbuster advert says it all for me. I'm just like, child, you just should have actually continued to say nothing. Navid takes on the question of the logo. Ironically, what you would have thought Akeem was there to do, but okay. And based on his answer, he would have been better off saying absolutely nothing and just simply going into the Wendy Williams pose and going, how you doing? Because he didn't say anything to really answer the question, which is a problem. So pitches are done, they pack up for the day, and the next day we all know it's time to go to Lord Sugar's boardroom. So they all march in there as they do, and of course Lord Sugar starts to ask some very basic questions about how the task went and how things went. And Akshay at this point is allowing the men to basically just hang themselves and say what it is that they've got to say. The girls already doing the preemptive strike of, well, I didn't agree with this and I didn't know what bougie meant and I wasn't this and I wasn't that, and you're just like, okay, girlfriend, here we go. So anyway, Lord Sugar decides to take a look at both of their brands, and you know, many of the things we've talked about, Lord Sugar identifies. He says, okay, we don't know what bougie is, because it's funny, he called it bougie based on how she spelt it. We don't know what bougie is, but you know, the audience that they presented to basically said in a nutshell that, you know, there were some flaws in it, but they could kind of see where you were coming from and they could kind of see what you were doing. Then we get to the guys, they're like, listen, nobody understood the turd looking logo. Nobody really knows why you did what you did. And actually it didn't really make that much sense. Not to mention, you know, in a nutshell, it was quite cliche. That, you know, those were kind of the main things that were coming out of that whole thing, which is what we knew. Do you know what I mean? Because like I say, you know, the stereotype of what a brand is all about isn't necessarily the way to go if you're thinking about, you know, pitching a new brand. And as Lord Sugar says, you know, we've come out of hard times. We're coming off the back of a pandemic. It's exactly companies like this that need to attract an audience, that need to get new customers through the door. Like, is that how you thought you were going to do it? And then, lo and behold, shocker, the girls win. no surprises. So of course that means it's time for the boys to retire to the little cafe where they all start cussing each other, and the girls get told, hey, you can go to your new home for the next few weeks while you're in this competition, and you know, go sip on a little champagne and do your thing. Now at this point, you know, my predictions, Akeem is definitely bringing Akshay is definitely bringing Akeem back into the boardroom, but we wait to see them go back into the, well, and actually at this point is when I know he's bringing Harry in there as well. And why? Because in the cafe, Harry decides to not just point the finger at Akeem for being rubbish, which is what he's been doing all day, but then turns round and says to Akshay, and you're rubbish too, because actually you were not taking responsibility for this team and leading them in the way that you should have done. Duh, duh, duh. Yes, dude, you two are going into the boardroom. Okay. I still think that Akshay is going to get sacked though. Akshay or Akeem, I just don't see how they're going to come out of there. And I'm going to say Akeem more so, because I feel like Akshay is going to fight his position and can fight his position. Whereas I feel like Akeem is a little bit like, he ain't got nothing to say. Like, he hasn't really got anything to say. Because the first thing you're going to have to explain is why you told people in one breath you're not a branding manager, but next minute took on a branding task. That don't make no sense to me. Does it make sense to you? Okay. The girls get sent back to the house, as I say. They're all excited. And what does Francesca and her feistiness come out with? Oh, this feels so bougie. I'm like, girl, you spent an entire task not understanding what bougie was until you won the task, and all of a sudden now you're bougie. Okay. Okay, this is what I don't like about these women when it comes to doing these kind of shows and doing these kind of tasks. They're far too disingenuous for me, but it's okay. It's okay. We're going to learn from you, because it's people like this you will find yourself working with, and you have to figure out how to navigate around those individuals. Like, that's something that's a real thing. The guys now, like I say, I was right. Akshay brings back into the boardroom Akeem and Harry, and the fighting talk begins. So of course, like I say, the three of them are in there, the boardroom fight ensues, and Akshay starts letting Akeem know, hey, you let the side down, the logo was rubbish. You know, at this point Akeem is like, well, you know, hey, I told you in the beginning what my position was. You're not a great, you know, you have to take accountability for the entire task. Harry, who to me is the absolutely most entertaining of actually all the guys from what I can gather. Harry's like, listen, you lot are both rubbish. What's hilarious is Akeem turns around and says, Harry, you were disruptive. You didn't help us all day. Everything we tried to do, you just disrupted completely. You were a problem for this task. And then Lord Sugar asks Harry, well, what did you contribute? Harry says, Harry can't really answer, because then he's basically saying, well, they didn't take any of my ideas. They didn't do any of the things that I wanted to suggest that we do. And so we end up in a situation where, you know, final words. Harry's final word, which is absolutely brilliant. He says to Lord Sugar, can I just say one final thing? These two have had their chance to shine and show that they can be your next apprentice, and they have failed. Hilarious. Akshay, Akeem kicked off. So who do you think they got rid of? Well, I have to say, unfortunately, Harry got the sack. And got fired. First one fired off the show. And let's just dissect for a moment why Harry got sacked. Because was Harry responsible for the logo? No. Was Harry responsible for the foolishness that was the advert? No. Or the brand concept, or the ideas that ultimately fell flat? No. But here's an important lesson for us to take on board when we're dealing with the world of business. Is that you've got to be able to work with people, and you have to be able to communicate. But I think Harry demonstrated that when you're actually coming across as being difficult to work with, and actually very direct in terms of criticizing people, but not seemingly being part much of the solution, that you will become targeted. And I feel like Lord Sugar, bearing in mind that all he has to make a judgment is the finished product that they come up with, the word of the other two that are in the room with him, and the word, of course, of Karen, who would have also observed the task. He can only make decisions based on the information he's given. And so from Harry's point of view, we don't know whether Harry's ideas would have been better. We don't know whether if they'd have listened to Harry, it would have made any difference whatsoever. But the reality of the matter, bearing in mind Harry wasn't the only person to disagree. Both Alex and Aaron openly disagreed with Akshay on the advert side. But I think the difference was Harry was actually quite divisive with it. He was very direct. I think it came across as insulting. And when he was very much, particularly when he was in the cafe and he put his neck on the chopping block, because he did that as soon as he looked at Akshay and said, and you are responsible for this as well, and you must be accountable, and you've not been accountable all day. As soon as he did that, he put his neck on the chopping block with Akshay, because I don't think Harry should have been brought into that room, honestly speaking. For me, a better candidate would have been Connor or Nick, because Nick openly said, I thought it was a good idea, thus proving that whilst he's got integrity, he's got no business sense whatsoever. And Connor, who just didn't say a word, like, I appreciate that they're going to cut things and we're only going to see part of what goes down. You know, there's going to be a lot of cutting on, film on the cutting room floor. But you're telling me that everything that Connor said got cut out? I don't think so. Connor just didn't seem to contribute that much. So I honestly don't even think Harry should have been brought into the boardroom. But the reality is that he stuck out, but for the wrong reasons. And that's all the impression that Lord Sugar was being given. So unfortunately, Harry went. But I feel like there are some conclusions we can take from the first show. Firstly, autocratic rule is not the way to go. Both Catherine and Akshay both ruled with an iron fist. Catherine was really lucky to get away with it just based on the fact that the girls won. Akshay was extremely lucky to get away with it based on the fact that the boys lost. And his concept was flawed and he didn't want to hear what anybody else had to say, as was the case with Catherine. So you got to be really careful with that. Feedback is important. If your team are saying it to you, it's likely that the wider public, the buying public, are going to have a similar viewpoint. The psychology of teams is really important as well. Leadership is not always about leading from the front. Sometimes it's about leading from behind and supporting and facilitating your team to do the work that they need to do. I feel that Catherine's team did that a little bit better in terms of putting the right people in the right places, apart from when we got to the pitching. And again, it is listening to the experience that people have, not just the things that they say they like doing or that they're good at. Listening to the experience they have, getting those receipts as to what they've achieved in those areas before deciphering whether they should be representing your company or not in a pitch. And as a team player, really thinking very carefully about the balance between how you support your team but challenge the stupidness, okay? Because it's always going to be out there, but you do have to think carefully about how you challenge people around you. Otherwise you're seen as divisive, you're seen as problematic, and like Harry, you could end up being fired. That's the very first episode. I thank you so much for sticking with me. If you've gotten to this point, please do take these lessons. Remember to like, comment and subscribe and let me know what you thought of the first episode of Apprentice, and we will be back for episode number 2 very, very soon. Bye.